Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday evening masterclass on redox. It's always such a pleasure to be here on a Tuesday evening discussing this revolutionary approach to health and vitality. Most of us have been taught and grew up working on health issues by addressing the symptoms, which can be effective, but it never, or very rarely, I should say, addresses the root of the problem. And redox is changing all of that. In fact, it's changing the entire paradigm of wellness and vitality. If redox is a new term for you, you are in wonderful company. It was for all of us until somebody we knew invited us to learn about it in a way like this, an educational seminar. Just know that redox is the energy that powers all life. Nothing happens in your body, my body, even our pets' bodies without a redox reaction. They're the language of the cells, all right? They are an amazing communication network that not only protects your healthy cells, but also helps to detect, repair, and replace any damage anywhere in the body. It's quite remarkable. So tonight's masterclass, we're going to explore not only, what is redox and why is it so profound, but why it might be of interest to you and why you might want to know about this. You might be here because you have a health challenge, or maybe you have a loved one who has a health challenge, or maybe you work in the health space and you're working with people all the time with health challenges and you're trying to find out, could redox be the missing link in their journey back to wellness? Some of you might be here because you like to be proactive with your health. I know as we go through life, many of us have recognized that it is much easier to maintain our health than it is to regain it once we've lost it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Some of you might be here because you're very active. You might be an athlete. We do have professional and Olympic athletes on this, but you don't need to compete at that level to get the same benefits with recovery, endurance, mental focus. Maybe you like to play pickleball. Maybe you just like to hike or bike. Maybe you just want more energy at the end of your day to be with the people you love and to do the things you enjoy doing. And we're going to talk a little bit about those athletic benefits tonight. Some of you are here because you've heard that there is some type of anti-aging benefit to this thing called redox, right? And we are all 24 hours older now than we were at this time yesterday. But what if there was a way to turn back the clock? Not just on the physical signs, the visible signs we see in the mirror when we look at, look at ourselves, but even on the inside. Dr. Hoffman often reminds us that the wrinkles on the outside are a reflection of the wrinkles and the oxidative stress that are happening on the inside, on our cells, our organs, our tissues. Well, what if there was a way to interrupt the breakdown of aging? And we're going to explore that tonight. Another reason people come and want to learn about this is because when you have a breakthrough, a groundbreaking technology of this magnitude that literally works in every body, there is an opportunity to make a real impact in this world beyond the impact you've already made in your lifetime. And if that's something that resonates with you, get back to the person that invited you. They can tell you a little bit more about what it's like to link arms with the people who are sharing this, educating people, making a living while making a difference. We don't have time to get into it on Tuesday nights. We'll talk a little bit about the company behind it because I think that's really important to know who's behind this. But on Saturdays, Dr. Hoffman's colleague, Dr. David Silverman, on the same Zoom and password, we'll talk about that. 11 o'clock East Coast time, he'll start off talking about how to get the best usage out of these technologies and these products. And then we kind of switch gears, put our entrepreneurial hats on, and talk about what it is like to share this. But tonight, it is my sincere hope that you get a sense of just how profound redox is and why your friend wanted you to learn about this. This is a master class. There is a question and answer period afterwards. And just a reminder, or not even a reminder because some of you, this may be your first time, but this company opted not to go down the pharmaceutical route. And by making that decision, it put us in a category where we cannot address specific disease names or conditions. That is an FDA rule that we have to follow to be compliant. So when you're putting in your questions, if you can maybe phrase them with, symptoms you're experiencing or functions that have been impacted, it's going to allow Dr. Hoffman to answer those questions in a much more compliant way because we want this technology to be around for decades to come. Right now, I'd love to introduce Dr. Carolyn Hoffman. She is a dear friend and colleague. She is a board-certified traditional naturopath, She's been working in the field of natural health for 25 years, and she's been working with this technology for over 8 years. What I love about Dr. Hoffman is not only does she bring decades of experience as a practitioner, but she is also on the medical board for this company. It's a volunteer position, but it puts her in the unique position to be able to kind of pull back the curtains and really understand not just redox at a deeper level, but also these products that evolved out of decades of research on redox. So I'm really excited. She is an eloquent speaker on this, puts it into terms all of us can understand. So, Carolyn, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I'm going to swap over here and change screens and say welcome, everyone. We always enjoy spending our time on Tuesday evening with you, and we want to appreciate your time for doing this because we know that everybody is always super busy in this day and age. There's always a lot of things that we can choose to do with our time. So I'm grateful that you're here. Back in 2011, I did not bother to take the time to look at it when somebody actually introduced it to me. So it was another 6 years before I finally paid attention to it, and I nearly missed it a second time. So I want to congratulate you for being here. I hope that by the time we finish this evening, you will grasp from what we share with you why I believe that this is foundational for everyone. So whether you're here because you've got health issues that you're trying to overcome, maybe you're wanting to get off medication, maybe simply you're not wanting to get onto medication and you're hoping to interrupt whatever's going on. I really truly believe that what we need to see is to throw out the mindset that we've had over a lot of things in terms of helping our body with natural therapies. And we're going to shift the way we look at things, and we're going to go much deeper to the foundation of the way that the body functions at its most basic. And as Lynn does a beautiful job in saying that both pets, plants and humans can benefit from this. So I can actually attest to that because I've been running some floral things lately and putting them to my flowers, and they've been doing beautifully. I'm going to share a screen. I'm going to get rid of this one for a second. We'll take this out and we'll pop over to here and come up with a large screen because I believe that people learn differently. So I want to make sure that we have both visuals and auditory. We talk about this as being our masterclass because we want to help you understand what is it within the human body that the body is doing with redox. How can we apply the science behind the benefits and the importance of it? And how can we put ourselves in the driver's seat of our own health with the breakthrough technology of being able to actually bio and energetically replace those same signaling messengers? And we'll talk about why they are the key to health and to longevity. So let's talk about the fact that, we are made up of these 70 to 100 trillion cells that make up the cells of the human body that form the tissue, the organ systems, and they're guided by genetic expression at the basis of this whole process. Now, why do we change? Because the real story isn't what we see on the outside, even though it's what we experience, but it's what's happening underneath the surface that we really want to address today. We start at youth, really like our phones with a 5-bar service. Everything's very strong, very quick, super functioning, and things alter as time goes on. And as we get to the end of our life, we can often feel like we're only operating on 1 bar of service. Things don't work quite as they did before. So what do all these diseases that are above the surface here have in common? Well, even if everything looks like it's fine on the surface before we get some kind of name, title to something or other, every stressor that's going on in our life, whether it's toxins, whether it's poor sleep, for example, whether it's infections, is invisibly accumulating below the surface. And when the call for help goes out in a cell, if it goes unheard of by the body, or the body simply lacks the resources to be able to respond to that call for help, that's where disease begins to set up its base. Now, science will actually tell us that they've come to the conclusion that cells change in their function 8 years before they become a named disease. So it kind of reflects the fact that stuff is going on under the surface that we're really not seeing. Now, all of these strategies, for example, everyone is tending to be doing a lot of things nowadays for our health. It's really blossomed in all sorts of directions. But as far as I'm concerned, I think very few people are actually asking themselves, is my body actually able to respond to whatever method I'm choosing to support health? And if the body isn't able to respond, where do things start to go wrong? Because this starts at the foundation, which is with redox signaling molecules. So you may be employing any one of these or maybe multiple things because you're very focused on saying, I want to prevent things going wrong in the future. I want to slow down that aging process. I want to optimize my health, and the biohacking has become the phrase for all of that. And you may be employing some of these things, but what we're going to show you is that all of these things only function providing our redox signaling foundation is very strong. The language of the cells to communicate and to control damage and repair is done through redox signaling molecules. Redox homeostasis, when redox is in balance, that means we are also in balance. We equal health. And we're going to look at how that changes. Now, if you're a science buff and you want to understand, because as Lynn always says, probably redox is a new term for you. It mostly is for most of us, and even for our doctors. If you were to go to your regular doctor at the moment, it's quite likely that they've never heard much about redox signaling, if anything at all. They may be trained a little bit later, post 2008, and they're the ones who are going to say, yeah, we've had training on redox biology, but they don't understand the breakthrough development in being able to actually bioreplenish. But if you are curious, here's a great site to start that journey of learning the mechanisms behind redox and how much it's involved in the human body. As we said, redox isn't new. It's actually been studied for decades because it's the critical force behind every single function in the human body. As Lynn often says, there is nothing that happens in the human body without a redox signal controlling that function. So with 6 Nobel Prizes and millions of published studies showing the impact of redox system, and when it's out of balance, what that looks like, it leads the basis, or in medical field, basically, of the largest field of health science currently. Researchers are trying to find out how to control these highly active molecules and how to make them into a drug. Now, that actually hasn't happened at the moment because we're not dealing with something that's a physical material, we're actually dealing with electrochemical processes, things that move at speed of light and beyond. But here you can see examples of universities and research facilities around the world who are all engaged in some form of redox biology research. And we have actually 6 Nobel Prizes in this field. So it's extremely well known about, and there are millions of studies that you can go look on the NIH website and kind of cross-connect redox with just about anything that you're thinking of. And it might not necessarily show you what a redox can do if it's beneficial, but it might show you how things break down and how it's tied to some particular type of disease for sure. Now, your cells, as you're sitting here this evening, are actually producing 50 million molecules of ATP per second. That's a huge amount of energy, and thank goodness it is, because that's the fuel that helps us exist as human beings and helps everything function in the human body. It's no different than an engine in a car. If it doesn't have the fuel and the spark to turn over and produce energy, that car's not going anywhere, and we're no different. Now, the Krebs cycle doesn't just make the fuel. It creates redox signaling molecules. These are the messengers that tell the energy where it needs to go in the body, when it needs to stop going somewhere, what it needs to build in the body, what it needs to repair. So in other words, this whole massive communication system is driven through redox signaling communication. So energy without signals to tell it where to go and what to do becomes really cellular chaos within the body. So we don't really have an energy problem if we're alive, although we may not be making as much as we might need. But we definitely have a signaling problem when we start to have disease. Now, oxidants can be thought of as the sounding the alarm, the fire alarm in the body. Reductants are really like the fire and rescue piece. They come in response to that alarm bell going off. And health is a very fast oxidant reductant response. Disease takes place when help basically doesn't arrive because communication fails. And that's where we talk about the fact that 8 years earlier than a disease name, cell function is beginning to falter, communication is breaking down. So we think of ATP as the electricity. Redox signals are like the grid operators. They're directing the power where it's needed, they're shutting it down when there's damage, and they're coordinating repair for us to stay healthy. Now, biology actually has a built-in process, unfortunately, of aging, and that actually starts in puberty. It's not in our 30s or 40s or 50s, it's at around 15 to 16 years old. We start to lose these signals at 1% per year from that time onward. So that is the natural inbuilt arc of aging. That's because we lose mitochondria, so we can't produce as many redox signaling molecules. That's where we also lose stem cells. By the time we're about 90, we've lost about 95% of our stem cell function. And along with it is the collagen loss. So by the time we're 30, we've lost a majority of the basis of our collagen that is going to survive going forward. So this whole inbuilt arc is taking place at a time when no one is thinking about getting old, for sure, right? That's probably always at least 20 to 30 years ahead of where you are currently. It's what we tend to think of as being old. And I'm sure no one in their teens is really even beginning to focus on the aging. They're looking forward to getting older because of the potential of what that could mean for their life. But every decade, we lose 10% of what we previously had. And what we have ages with us. And so even the redox molecules that we have as we get older are nowhere near as powerful in their communication and their amplification as they were when we were young. Now, if we think about what that looks like in reality, it's pretty obvious, right? Young people heal very quickly. If they fall over, they bounce up, they don't break bones. If they cut themselves or they're injured, their healing is much more rapid than when we're in our 50s, 60s, and 70s. And we see the difference in the skin. Skin cells are turning over at 28 days rather than 50 to 90 days as we get older. And so that aging process becomes more visible on the outside. The biggest piece of it is going on the inside. Now, through groundbreaking science, Verdis Norton, who you can see on the screen here, was responsible for a vision that took 10 years of publicly traded research of these exact same molecules to overcome an impossibility, a scientific impossibility, something that science said could never be done, which was to create bioavailable, stabilized redox signaling molecules. And that took place in 2007. So if you haven't heard of redox, it's actually been around quite a long time, the stabilization, and yet so many people have yet to know that this breakthrough occurred. So this is a non-toxic, safe product that literally is going to impact every single cell in the human body in ways that the vitamins and the minerals and all the other products that we talk about, or all the other methods of supporting our health, doesn't do, because it's not redox signaling. And we're going to talk about a massive decision that Verdis had to make as to whether he was going to go down the drug route with pharmaceutical company, or whether this was going to end up, as it has, in the hands of us so that we can do something because it's not a drug. Now, your mitochondria is making redox signaling molecules from the fluids in the body, which is salt and water, saline. If we go into hospital, we know that we're given saline drips, right? If we're dehydrated or we're in an operation, we need to be replenished because that is the language of how cells communicate. Now, CO does the same thing outside our body. It takes the saline and it breaks the molecular bonds into sodium, chloride, hydrogen, and oxygen, 4 bonds. And using electrochemical processes, we restructure these same elements into stabilized redox signaling molecules. They're bioidentical to the human body. So they're not something that the body has to look at and think, well, what do I do with this? Can I change this into something that's useful? There's nothing to be altered. It is literally innate to the human function. So the body knows exactly what to do with these molecules in that beautiful blue bottle because it's literally the same chemistry as our cells are performing every day. The only difference is that the body is super smart and it can make them in nanoseconds. It takes us at this point in time, after 15 years in the market, about 16 hours to go through this patented process. When the development first took place back in 2007, the breakthrough was to be able to take these molecules that are being made over 10 years in public research from a stability of only 10 minutes, which is why nobody could do much with them, to 12 months back in 2007. But it took them 3.5 days to create that process. In the last 5 years, our science has rapidly advanced, and now we can actually do this whole thing in 16 hours. This is the FDA registered GMP and facility in Utah. This is the only facility in the world that makes these stabilized redox signaling molecules. And what you're looking at, the tanks there, is various stages that this goes through. We have to control things like temperature, pH, salinity, and voltage and amperage to be able to make this magic happen, to break those bonds and stabilize them. The moment they get to exactly the formulation that we want, the potential that we want, we can basically lock them off and suspend them. So scientifically, the big break was, how can you suspend something that in these pouches and the blue bottles have positive and negative charges suspended that don't go back together and just neutralize each other, but actually have a lifespan now of 21 months. And so that is the big, huge breakthrough, that we're able to actually take something that only would hang around for 10 minutes originally. And now we've got this opportunity to bio-replenish and combat the loss that we're going to experience every day that we live, and be able to do something to kind of slow down that aging process and really reverse and kind of combat a lot of the changes that come with a loss of redox. Now, we have 7 patents and over 1,000 trade secrets. And from this one facility, we don't deal with middlemen anywhere. Every consumer in 35 countries in the world receives their product from this one facility. We protect our technology enormously because no one else is able to actually reverse engineer what we have. So we broke through scientific barriers back in 2007, and we're still the only company that's managed to do what we do. We have about 20 distribution centers around the world, so the product gets sent to those distribution centers, and from there it serves the local area. So if you're living in Hungary, for example, or in South America, your product is coming from a facility that's close to you, so you're always getting a very fresh product. So I mentioned that we are the world's first and only cell signaling supplement company. We created this category within the supplement industry worldwide, which is kind of tricky because nobody really knows, even to this day, what to do with us in many ways. In the United States, we fall under FDA regulations for nutritional products. And anyone who knows and has purchased, a vitamin or a mineral, something that comes in a pill or a capsule, will know that on the back of the label, there's always the ingredients. And that's because those products have physical materials that you have to be able to ingest, Too much of them can cause a problem. So there's regulatory arrangements around, the quantity of all these ingredients and what can and can't be included, because too much could definitely cause a problem. You could overdose in some certain incidences. And can actually kill yourself if you take too many of these things. Just because they're a nutrient doesn't mean that they're totally safe or totally innocuous. Now, the challenge is, because we're redox and we have to follow those guidelines, we have to actually label what's on the back of our bottles. And so anyone who picks it up will know it's confusing. What are the original ingredients we start with? Salt and water. It's not what we end up with. And how do we know that? Because we do independent third-party testing. This goes out to independent laboratories. All our batches are analyzed by redox specialty facilities around the world that validate that what we're purchasing is not salt and water, even though we have to comply with that category within the United States, but it's actually bioactive redox signaling molecules. Now, if you're actually to look at our product arrangements and what we have to, regulatory agreements that we have to read in Europe, for example, they consider us a food. So we have slightly different regulations there. Now, if you go as far as Asia, in Taiwan, for example, they think that we're a water. So it kind of gives you a sense of the fact that nobody really knows what to do with us, because we are the first and only people in this field. But we meet FDA registered facility, GMP. We meet halal and kosher standards. And because we service the Olympic committee levels of athletes around the world and professional athletics, we are water approved and also NSF sports approved, as well as dietary supplements. So in other words, we have lots of guarantees, not only of the manufacturing standard, regulation, and consistency, but also that we're definitely buying what it says on the label. Now, James Watson, who you may know from the Nobel Prizes, the DNA discovery, has stated that diabetes, cancer, and cardiovascular disease are all redox signaling deficiencies. In fact, he actually went so far to say that it's his belief that all disease is actually a redox deficiency. In 2016, a year before I started using this product with my clients and family and friends, there was an interesting article that the Huffington Post talked about, that ASEA was one of 5 scientific breakthroughs that was going to shape our lives to come. And it's certainly proven to be that way for what I've seen. So for 15 years, ASEA has made products that contain exactly the same redox signaling molecules that our own bodies are making. And this blue bottle has become pretty famous by now. We think of this as broad spectrum. It's what we think of as non-targeted. In other words, it is going to affect every cell. We're not thinking about using it in terms of how you might use a physical nutritional supplement. Many people are taking physical supplements that are targeted towards liver function or digestion or cardiovascular disease or maybe cognition. Those are cherry picking and working on physical materials that will target a particular symptom in a particular location. Here we're looking at the function of how every cell has to work in order for any of those materials to be usable in the human body. And so this upregulates, this replenishes the loss of redox and begins to upregulate our redox potential across the body. So we call this as non-targeted, because it's going to affect everything. How do you know where it's going to direct that use of energy? If you remember at the beginning, I said that redox is basically directing the energy where it's needed and the communication where it's needed. So in other words, internally, your body naturally knows how to prioritize the use of this for whatever is important within you. Now remember, most of those changes are happening below the surface. Now you might have some things that have got some names to it, so it's pretty obvious that you've got damage maybe in your joint areas, or maybe damage in your hormonal system, because if you've got a problem, then you've got damaged cells that aren't communicating clearly. If we are healthy, then we have healthy cells. So what's your body going to do with it? Well, what we ask you to do is to take a benchmarking form and to benchmark everything about your health, not just the thing that you're thinking about. What's your energy level like? Do you sleep really well? Maybe you sleep well, but you still wake up tired. Maybe you have to get up in the middle of the night 2 or 3 times. Perhaps you can't go to sleep quickly. Any of those things, rate your level of discomfort. How much stress do you have? What's your hormone balance like? And there are all sorts of areas within that. Is it libido? Is it blood sugar? Is it the typical perimenopausal, menopausal changes that women see? What's your mental focus and clarity like? Has that shifted? What's your endurance and recovery like? And we'll talk about how you can actually impact that directly with topical use. Skin challenges, if you've got them, take photos of them, whatever they are, because stuff changes and it's always good to have a record. What's your discomfort level for joints and muscles, digestion, eyes, floaters, and anything else that you want to track? Rate your level from 1 to 10, 1 being insignificant, 10 being very severe. Rate it, and when we want you to start, unless you are on blood pressure medication or you're on blood sugar medication, where you might start a little slower, we're going to begin everybody at 4 ounces a day, 2 ounces in the morning, 2 ounces in the evening. At the end of the first week, probably only 10 to 15% of us are going to see a change. That is normal. Your body is using it. It's already consuming it and it's directing it where it needs to, but it doesn't mean that those external challenges that you will see a shift in or feel a shift in immediately. But at the end of the first week, re-benchmark everything. If you're in that 10 to 15%, just carry on, unless you really want to move things a little faster. If you want to move the needle faster, drink more. But continue to track it 2 weeks, a month, and so on out. Now, if you aren't somebody who's seen any kind of a change whatsoever, we want you to double up. Go to 8 ounces for the rest of that month and continue to track. We want you to rebuild your loss faster, because we know that that is going to help the body demonstrate what it's doing with it. But at the end of the first month, we do know that 50% of people are excited about the changes that they're seeing. Now, it may be that your joints are really bad, but you may be sleeping better, you may have more energy, you may feel less stressed, and your joints may not begin to improve till month 3 or 4, but it is already working and you're really tracking where it's going. At the end of month 3, we know that 90% of people are really super excited about the improvements that the body's making with this improved redox function. I want to just point out for you that in the process of cellular recovery, how the body uses anything that we give it, there is a time process that goes on, that things happen in month 1 that are more about the foundation of making changes, which you will see. Month 2, we begin to stabilize those cellular changes. Month 3 is where we begin to kick in. We've got 50% turnover for the first time of blood cells at that point. We're now starting to ramp up because we've got more energy in our cells. And month 3, stronger things begin to happen. Month 4 is really in the process of natural healing, where systems begin to start to come more into balance. We're about to publish some studies that we've been doing where we've been measuring cytokines and things in the blood that actually denote how much inflammation we have. And we can track directly, the higher that number, the more inflammation you have within the body, and therefore more challenges you will have with diseases. What we see is that we get drops that start to tail downward in month 1 and 2. But in line with this whole process of just foundational healing, what we see is this drop accelerates in month 3 and 4, and we actually get an 83% drop in inflammation by the time we're at the end of month 4. I always love to say to people, if you're working with the enzymes, as I do with digestive health, you got to think in terms of 6 months for your body to do all of this work and then really bed in and solidify that change that you've seen, so that your health is really much stronger. We need to think it much more in those terms. I think so many of us are in a space of kind of like Amazon Prime. If it doesn't work in the first week or the first month, we think it isn't working, but the body is the thing that's doing the healing. And here, the liquid is actually going to heal anything. It is amplifying and elevating your cell's capacity to communicate very loudly when there's a problem, to provide the resources to do the healing and do the job that the body knows how to do. The body is designed to heal. Rosie's remarkable journey backwards in time is why I've come to the conclusion that this is the single most influential product technology that I've ever used. It's a privilege to work with, because here we have this real life journey of Rosie at 84, looking really very short on internal energy, very obviously full of a lot of oxidation on the inside because of all those wrinkles on the outside and all the irritation and inflammation you can see in her face, who at 7 weeks in this first photo actually didn't think that it was working. So we say, take photos of yourself. Her son, who's a doctor, had put her on this, and he showed her this second photo, and she said, oh, I guess it is doing something. I guess I'll keep using it. Here she is at 87, and here she is at 91. You know, there isn't another supplement that could literally take somebody at 84, progress them 7 years forward in their life, and in their 90s, look, and I'm sure you'll probably agree with me, at least 10 years younger than they were when they started in their 80s. And that's because all these other single supplements don't contain what ASEA contains, which is redox signaling molecules, which are the foundation of how your cells work. I mentioned it's broad spectrum. What's in here is also in this white tube, except this white tube has a silica clay. It's a 5-year project to find something that wouldn't activate those molecules. And this is a beautiful opportunity to do the anti-aging. It's called Renew 28. This clear gel, as you'll see, is for skin healing. We turn over the skin cell turnover changes by 16% in 28 days. In other words, it's speeding up by 16%. You're looking younger, and that's why everybody loves this for the long haul, because when you're on it for the long haul, what you're going to see is literally changes over time. That you'll have people saying to you, I haven't seen you for 5 years, and yet you look younger. What are you doing? And that's because we're reboosting that skin cell turnover in more like it was for us 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years earlier. But we also have improvements in fine lines and wrinkles and elasticity and tone, as you can see from these photos. So broad spectrum communication made us say, you know, why are we seeing all the changes that we're seeing? Remember, nobody's done what we've done, so we've had to go into research to find out why were we hearing and seeing all these stories that people would be reporting for the last 15, 16 years. And in 2017, we put our product in with Torit Labs for them to run an 8-week double-blind placebo-controlled genetic study. We wanted to know, does it make any difference to the genes? Well, 100% of the test group, who were healthy 35-year-olds, who interestingly, when they had their genetic expression tested before they began the process, actually had already downgraded their genetic expression. It was already down-regulating. Now, I don't think that they felt any of that, but it was already a sign that things were tailoring downwards, or aging had already begun. And after 8 weeks on the product, we saw that 100% of that test group had a 20 to 31% sustained and beneficial improvement in 5 genetic pathways. It's interesting that we gave them the plain saline that we use before it becomes redox signaling molecules, and the placebo group had a 0% response. If anybody knows science, you'll know that that's really not a normal response. But what is important is whether you have an issue, or whether you just want to stay healthy, whether you want to combat aging as we get older, or you just want to be preventative, this can be for everybody, right? We're improving immune system health. We're strengthening cardiovascular health with arterial elasticity. We're improving gut health and improving digestive enzyme production, which means you nourish your body better. And all of those supplements that you take can be used more effectively, especially in combination with stronger redox signaling. We're modulating hormone balance and supporting vitality and wellness. We're supporting the body's ability to respond to external stresses. That's what we call allostatic load. Do you have a small bucket that can deal with toxins and everything that stresses you? Or do you naturally, or were you naturally born with a large bucket, so to speak, and you're less affected? Well, we want to strengthen your allostatic capacity, and that's what we do here. We're supporting your body's ability to respond to external stresses and defend you on a daily basis. And we're helping to maintain a healthy inflammatory response. All of those are foundational. Right? If you never did anything else, this is the one reason you should be taking this, because we are working at the genetic level. Not simply playing around with the symptoms, we're going to the foundation of how our body is going to determine whether we're going to be healthy or whether we're going to promote problems. Now, each one of those genes is like a doorway that opens multiple other pathways, signaling pathways. What's in blue just gives you a connection to those pathways that have fancy names, but what they control. So if you can spot something there and you say, you know, I'm not as even-tempered as I should be, or I really have gut health issues, well, that shows you pathway number one is probably down-regulating. And this would be a good reason for you to actually get on board with this, because it affected 100% of people in that test group. So I don't consider that we'd all be any kind of an exception. I highlighted pathway 4 because that is inbuilt into every cell of the human body. It's how the body naturally turns on that oxidant alarm the moment we've got some inflammation to recruit the reductant healing, which is partly glutathione, which is our master antioxidant. And we saw that it affected this. And then we said, well, you know, can you help us, other universities, and kind of study, would it be possible if we could, instead of affecting every cell, if we could kind of just play that note? Rather than instead of playing every note on a piano, let's just play the chord related to inflammation because of the importance of how that promotes disease. And in our university studies, Redox Gold increases that cellular response to oxidation by 160%. And by tailoring a 3.5 to 4 year project here, Western Australia University and Bath University in England were able to help us tweak the species of redox and put it together with molecular gold. This product, if you have anything that hurts you, grab some of this really quickly, because it turns the cells on, and being able to increase their response to inflammation and upregulate the glutathione by 280%. In other words, what we're targeting here is providing rapid relief, but also long-term recovery with repeated use. Now, if you've got something that hurts, rate your level of discomfort, check out your range of motion, take photographs if necessary. And here's what we want you to do. Take the gel, and you'll see that it's still just as clear as the skin one. In the light, you'll see that there is 24-karat molecular gold flakes in there. And this one we want you to rub on. We want you to massage it in there as part of what activates that redox function. And once you've rubbed it into that area that's affected, start looking at your watch. If you haven't got to a 0 in about 3 minutes, apply it again, and also apply it around the neck and the vagus nerve. If you haven't got to a 0 by 10 minutes, we want you to take the white gel, which is broad spectrum, so it's going to activate and sometimes just pull everything together. Put that on the area that hurts and also over the throat. 9 out of 10 people are going to see things most of the time in under 3 minutes. Right? And this is not about an analgesic. This is, as we said, activating and turning on your cells' alarm response and healing mechanism so that you can combat that problem right on the site. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Once you see how quickly the body responds to that, you'll probably get a sense of what's happening below the surface with the liquid. Thermographic imaging reveals rapid changes in the body's response to this cellular stress. Right? And that's consistent with the increased glutathione and what we call the NRF2, the oxidant response. This is the effect of the body restoring the ability to signal and to respond to inflammatory markers. So we have these two beautiful gels, one that's targeting relief tension, rapid relief and recovery, discomfort, targeted towards working out before and after, and it's just this go-to. And then we have the one that is going to help us with appearance of fine lines and wrinkles, priming the skin, improving hydration and elasticity, and nourishing and moving that skin cell turnover faster, just like it was when you were younger. Now, when you bring your cell communication back online, we're going to see all sorts of diverse ways in which the body addresses those symptoms. And in the past, people have been saying, well, let me give me something for breathing. Let me give something to my body for skin challenges. Let me focus on my hormones and stop my hair falling out in chunks. Or maybe let's focus on my energy and my mobility. Instead of doing that, we're going to target every cell. Because if the breathing cells and the lung were okay, there wouldn't be a breathing problem. If the skin cells were healthy, there wouldn't be a skin challenge. If the hormonal system and the genetics were working correctly behind there, we wouldn't be losing our hair and having problems. And so this is why we're not looking at targeting those symptoms by name, but looking at the foundation of how everything functions in the first place. And these are all examples of people that I've helped with those challenges, thanks to the ASEA Redox. So ASEA's product, as we said, is not working at the effect level, the symptoms. We're targeting the systemic root level of how the body functions. And the longer you are on this, the more benefit you're actually going to see. What you need is something you're going to have to work on. We say start with 4 ounces. If you don't see a shift very quickly, double up, go to 8 ounces for a while. Fill that glass up, and as you get there, your body's going to make the changes. You're going to be able to see what they are. Then you can pull it back down and see what's perfect for me. That's what makes this product so very unique, because we aren't all the same. Your body's going to have a different journey towards health than your friend who might be sharing it with you. And so we want you to play around with that and track those changes and find exactly what you need to maintain vitality and wellness. Lynn mentioned that we have an athletic advantage. As I said, that we meet WADA compliance because we support a lot of Olympic athletes around the world with this product. Our studies at Appalachian Human Performance Lab target and show us that they get a 29% increase in endurance and performance and recovery. What can that mean for us, right? Well, 29% extra in recovery and faster and more endurance can be pretty powerful in anyone's life. What else could you achieve if you have more endurance, more recovery, much more energy, sharper mental focus, quicker responses and reflexes, all the things that matter to these athletes, because it's the difference between becoming first or second or third, or maybe not medaling at all. And if you want to know more about that research, go to look at the discoverredox.com on the intro page. You'll actually see Sean Burke here, who in his 60s is actually running faster and beating times he made in his 20s, thanks to Redox. And so it's a very powerful technology. I mentioned that we're first to market. We're still in this area. Nobody can teach us what we've done. We've had to put millions of dollars of research out with prestigious places to take our product, to study it, and teach us the mechanisms behind it that result in the outcomes that we see, that people tell us and show us that happen for them. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to Discover Redox on the science page. If you want to see examples of what people are talking about on their own outcomes, go to Real Redox Results Facebook group, where people just voluntarily post their own stories, and that's always interesting, right? The science is great, but I always want to see, well, what does that look like in reality for somebody? What are people seeing? You know, are they all seeing good results, and what do those look like? And then we start our event every week by actually playing one of these recorded interviews. We have them live every other week, and then they end up here on a repository. So join us on a Thursday for the next live one, but you can go listen to those stories. We're going to talk about the ethos, and this is where I bring Lynn in, because Lynn is our expert on being able to share with us what she and I think of as very much just as important as the product itself. And that is the ethos and the big decision that Verdis Norton had to make. So, Lynn, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Thanks, Carolyn. It really is extraordinary that we have this at our fingertips now, and it is because of the vision and the integrity of one man, Vertus Norton. He intuitively knew when he came across this, he just intuitively knew that it was groundbreaking. And initially, he was a business guy. He was the vice president of international strategy for Kraft Foods, had been doing that for years. So to him, this was going to be a business play. Get the molecules, stabilize them, and sell them. And he thought selling them to a pharmaceutical company was going to be the best way to get it out to the world. So he started talking to pharmaceutical companies, but at the same time, he got a group of people, 40 people, friends, family members, church members, people with different levels of health challenges to try it. Six of those people had very significant health challenges and had been told to get their affairs in order. So these people had unlimited access. So as he's talking to these pharmaceutical companies, one of them was very, very interested, sent their top scientists out. Their CEO came out. They were very impressed with what they saw and offered him a very, very large check. However, there was a caveat. If he took the check, everybody had to come off of it, himself, his family, all these people in his focus group. And he had gone back to this focus group after 2 months, and those 40 people had turned into like 120 people. They were giving it to friends and family members who had challenges because they were getting so many benefits. They were starting to share it with other people, and they were shipping it to 20 different countries. Now, he had no idea this was going on. But those six people who had had those severe challenges where they were told to get their affairs in order seemed to be thriving. And so he said to this pharmaceutical company, look, I can't, ethically, morally, I can't take this away from them. And they said, look, people deal with their health the best they can. If you want this money, you walk away from the technology. And I mean, what would you do, right? We're talking tens of millions of dollars. But I am so grateful that he said no. He said, I just can't do that and live with myself because these six people. And so he turned that down and he started this company that we all know and love called ASEA. And when he did that, he really wanted this to be his legacy to humanity. He wanted to be able to bring this to everyone, and that's why we do these, so that you can learn about it, you can share this with people you care about. And he knew that it was going to be hard to get something out on the market where if you looked at the bottle, it just says salt water. People, don't understand that redox is salt water. Most of us don't even know what redox is. So he recognized very early on that there had to be some kind of education involved. And that's why he chose this distribution model of word of mouth, direct marketing, network marketing, next level marketing, whichever word you want to use. And he really wanted to transform that industry so that it was much more transparent and had a lot more integrity. And so this company was founded with the culture that puts people and purpose and principles above ego, above economics, above profits. I mean, obviously they are a company that needs to make a profit, but they look at things very carefully, and their decisions are based on what is best for humanity, what is best for the people. And honestly, in a world now where there's so much corporate greed and everything is about profit, it's just, I think, very refreshing that there is a company out there that truly has a heart and a soul where people matter, where it's more about the relationships that we are building, not just making a transaction with someone. It's more about being of service to other people and doing what's best for them, whether or not they end up getting ASEA and trying it. That almost is secondary. But if we can better people's lives just by being in them, that is what he wanted to create, a community of like-minded people with that as their mission. And so again, if that's something that resonates with you, we don't get to talk about it as often as we'd like. We get to talk about it a little bit on Tuesday nights, but we really do dive into what does it look like to link arms with people who have that type of mentality, who really just want to do good in this world. And we talk more about that on Saturdays. But I think it's important to know whether it's something that you're looking at as a business or to bring into your practice, or if you're just looking at this for yourself or a loved one to take to help your health either be regained or maintain it. I think it's always important to know who stands behind the product. And so it's always nice on Tuesday nights that we get a couple minutes to do that. So I really appreciate being able to share that with you all. And I didn't see a whole lot of questions, Carolyn, which is good. We may be on time tonight, right? So I'm going to turn it back over to you so we can look at the questions that are
Yeah,
there.
yeah, there are a few that have come in now. So let me just add, I'll just add us here. Let me just stop the recording.